Thanks so much for joining us today. God wants to do so much for you and through you, and we'd love to hear about it. Take a moment to send your story to stories@parkerhill.org. And if you'd like to partner with us financially, you can do that by going to parkerhill.org/give and choose the giving option that works best for you. Well, thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoy today's message.
Oh, Christmas. It's supposed to be the most wonderful time of the year. But what about when it's not? In fact, at this time of year, things tend to get complicated. And we've been trying throughout this series to make things a little more simple. They get complicated when we overspend and we bump into overbearing relationships and when we have too much in our schedules. My name is Dan. I'm one of the pastors here at Parker Hill, and this is the last part in our series, Simple Christmas. And our hope throughout this series has been to help you make this Christmas a meaningful Christmas, to help you navigate through the complexity that seems to just rush up at us every time in December of every year. And so throughout this series, we've been talking about how to navigate the complexity in three big areas. The first week we talked about simplified gift giving. Last week we talked about simplified relationships, and this week we're going to talk about simplified schedules. Because you know, as well as I, that our schedules fill up pretty quickly. You know, the very busy, kind of crazy, leaves you cranky Christmas calendar. We all have one. And have you noticed that there's supposed to be this sense of wonder at Christmas? You know, the lights and the carols, the traditions, the memories that we make together. You probably have some of your favorite family traditions, favorite things that you do every year, the kind of thing you do that it's not Christmas unless you do them. And so think about one of those. I want you to share it with someone nearby. So think about one of your favorite family traditions, one of the things that you just got to do every year for it to be Christmas. And go ahead, tell your neighbor. Oh, the glow of Christmas wonder. Yeah, looking forward to those things, aren't we? I think because my family worked so hard to make Christmas so special that they have like this whole host of family Christmas traditions that I love, and Christmas is my favorite holiday of the year. But there's one tradition that I didn't do necessarily with my family, that Christmas wasn't Christmas until I did this one thing. I started when I was young, and I'm probably not the only one to do it, but what we'd do is I would turn out all the lights, except for the lights on the Christmas tree. And then when no one else was around, I would lay under the tree and look up through the branches at all the Christmas lights. And I would just let the glow wash over me, and I felt the wonder of Christmas. And that's what Christmas is to me. And maybe you have something like that, something that you love to experience every year because of the wonder of the moment, because of the way that it comes over you and you get this sense that, well, this is special. In the video you saw this definition of wonder. It's surprise. It's mixed with admiration. It's caused by something beautiful, unexpected, unfamiliar, or inexplicable. Christmas. Wonder, awe, peace, and joy. These are all words that we'd like to use to describe our Christmas. But I have to ask you, did those words describe how you felt this past week? See, we try to pack all kinds of things into our December. We decide that this is the time of year that wouldn't it just be great for us to redecorate the house, like inside and out? Seems like the best month to do that. And then we go out and we try to buy presents for everyone and not forget anyone. And you look online and it says there's one left in the store, so you rush to the store to get it, and then you find out they don't have it. And now you're late for the Christmas program that you're gonna go to, and as you're rushing there, you realize you need to stop on the way home to pick up some ingredients for your cookies. And then as you're doing all that, you realize, oh, I forgot to buy the gift for that teacher. And then you realize, oh man, I didn't buy that gift, and I didn't buy the white elephant gift for the business party. And then you're like, okay, Christmas is coming up, and then at Christmas, the kids are gonna be with mom or dad, and then we gotta pick them up, and then we're going over to my brothers and sisters for that big Christmas gathering, and like this stuff just piles up and fills up, and the schedule goes crazy, and I'm just getting started. You know how it is with our schedules. And instead of wonder, I think we feel a different emotion. Stress, pressure, out of control, rushed. In the middle of this craziness this year, the question I've been asking myself is, have I lost the capacity for wonder? Can I even lay under the tree this year without looking up and seeing fake needles and broken bulbs? Have I lost my capacity for wonder? You see, in all this craziness, wonder gets swallowed up by our schedules. And you might be saying, why does this matter? Well, this matters because, as a pastor and professor wisely put it, wonder is the pathway to worship. Wonder is the pathway to worship. And so, we all know what it's like to get beyond Christmas, enter into the new year. And at that time, we're emotionally exhausted because of what we did this month. We're financially drained because of what we did this month. Maybe we're farther away from God instead of closer to Him because of what we did this month. And so how do we recapture the wonder in the middle of schedules that are stuffed full like Christmas stockings? See what I did there? I did that. It's Christmas. All right. Now, Mary, the mother of Jesus, is actually going to help us out, and not in the way that most of you think. So to find Mary's story, we're going to be in Luke chapter 2 together. Luke chapter 2, you can turn there in your Bible or Bible app, or you can follow along on the side screens. And like we did last week, we're going to zoom in on one part of the story. We're going to zoom in detail of this very familiar story, starting in verse 1. It says, in those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to their own town to register. Now, here's what's going on. Caesar Augustus was the Roman emperor at the time, and he decides to take a census. And what he's really doing is he wants to get a record of everyone who's in his empire so that he can tax them. Not much has changed. And so he puts out a decree for everyone in the Roman Empire to be enrolled. And because Israel is in the Roman Empire, they have to participate too. And so put yourself in Mary's shoes. Some guy about 1,500 miles away decides exactly what you're going to be doing during your final trimester of your pregnancy. Thanks. And they're going to travel around 90 miles, some of which is over pretty rough terrain, to the town of Joseph's ancestors, to Bethlehem. And this is not Mary's choice, but she's going to pack up and go with her big belly and her cankles, and she's not going to have family around and the family doctor to help out with an emergency. She just has to go. And we notice one thing right off the bat, and it's this: someone else sets the schedule. Someone else sets the schedule. She doesn't decide when the baby comes, and now she can't even decide where she is when the baby arrives. Someone else sets the schedule. Sound familiar? I mean, no one consulted you when they decided to put Christmas on December 25th. And you didn't get to have a say when they decided that the Christmas party would be on the same day as the two Christmas programs because you have one kid in preschool and one in elementary. Nobody consulted you. No one asked if you wanted those in-laws. They just came as part of the deal. And they have their Christmas traditions. Someone else sets the schedule. And so that's what we're dealing with here. I agree with the author Lance Witt, who wrote this. He said, following Jesus cannot be done at a sprint. You can't live life at warp speed without warping your soul. I agree with that. In fact, there are two types of busyness, at least I think so. Two types of busyness. One is the kind you choose, and the other is the kind you don't choose. And when it comes to the kind you choose, you might have to make some changes. If you get to choose, you might need to figure out what your priorities are, make some changes, cut some things, make some necessary adjustments. But that's a whole different talk, because the kind of crazy schedule that we're talking about here is the one that you didn't choose. And unless you become a monk or a nun, there's going to be a lot you're expected to do at Christmas time. Someone else sets the schedule. And so in this situation, the question is not, what can we cut? The question we're addressing today is, how do we navigate the complexity of a full schedule without losing our souls at Christmas? And so I'm so glad that Mary's going to help us out with this. Look at what happens next in verse 4. It says, "So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. And he went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child." So Mary and Joseph, they're going to make the trek to Bethlehem, and not by their choice. Someone else has set the schedule. And did I mention that it's 90 miles away and that Mary is very pregnant? Now, can you imagine Mary? The baby is coming soon, but with every step that she takes or every jolt of the donkey, if she rode on one, she's saying, "Not now, not yet, not here, no, no, no." And if Joseph is like the typical guy, then they get lost at least once on the journey. And Mary's saying, "Why can't you just pull over the donkey and ask someone?" And he's saying, "No, I don't want to. I can figure this out." And so finally they get there about 4 or 5 days later, and verse 6 tells us this, that while they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. And so they finally show up in Bethlehem, and they evidently got there later than the crowds. And it's full. The town is full because it's small. Bethlehem's not a big place, and so it's full. It's also full because it's Bethlehem. The Jews took their lineage seriously, and so anybody who was a descendant of David or anyone that had lived there originally definitely came back there. It was a place of pride. And so it's full because it's Bethlehem. It's also full because it's a chance to make some money. I mean, this was a commercial opportunity. Just like when we had the total eclipse earlier this year and people were willing to travel long distances just to be in that path of totality, where people were visiting, there's a chance to make some money. For example, one news outlet reported that the town of Hopkinsville, Kentucky, population 32,000, boasted the longest totality in the country, so they're kind of a prime place to go. That would be 2 minutes and 41 seconds. Great. And expected as many as 500,000 people to show up. For the event, it spent heavily in hopes of reaping $50 million in return. They rebranded themselves Eclipseville, and they hired a social eclipse coordinator to prepare for the crowds. And so this is a rare event. The idea here is that when people are visiting, there's money to be made, and the same was happening here. Folks that never would come back again were showing up in this city, and so there's an opportunity for people to make some money. And so it's crowded. It's crowded for all of those reasons. And as a result, all of the paid rooms, all of the free rooms, all of the guest rooms are taken, so there's no comfortable place to stay. And Mary gives Joseph the look as if to say, if you only just asked for directions, could have been here already. And there's some good debate about where they actually ended up. What did it really look like? It could have been a stable of some sort. Probably, though, a cave or even the crowded bottom floor of a home, because the animals were brought in during the night for their protection and for the warmth of the home. And verse 7 tells us this. It says, "And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them." They didn't set the schedule. And do I even need to say it? These circumstances are less than ideal. When what mom wants to have a baby far from home, away from family, their doctor, and instead be surrounded by stinky, dirty animals? No, Mom, I know. And to top it all off, they're interrupted by some smelly people that want to get really close to this newborn baby. And let me just summarize what happens in the next 8 verses, because that's the part we looked at last week with the shepherds. And they get this announcement from God, and they're sent to see the newborn king. But there's no record of Mary being told that they're coming, and so they just show up. Verse 16. "So they, the shepherds, hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was lying in the manger. And when they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them." The shepherds, full of excitement, burst into the room, interrupting everything, and they want to see the baby, and they excitedly share their story of what they saw out in the fields, and then they eventually go away celebrating. Question: moms, what's the first thing that you want to do after your baby is born? I think you want a quiet moment with your child. Hey, moms, what's the last thing that you want right after you give birth to a child? Answer, you definitely don't want a bunch of sweaty, smelly guys, like a locker room full of guys coming in to come and hug your baby, all right? You just don't want it. But that's what happened. And it's not all bad. It's not all good. But these were real people. A 16 to 19-year-old girl having a baby miles away from family. And this schedule, it's out of their control. These circumstances are less than ideal. How would you have handled that schedule? My point is this. If anyone had reason to be frustrated or stressed out that first Christmas, it's Mary. If anyone had an excuse to let it all pass by in a blur because she's busy, it's Mary. If anyone should feel worn out and drained after Christmas, it's Mary. She could be stressed, she could be distracted, and yet verse 19 is in the Bible, and it's remarkable. Check this out. It says, but Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. What? But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. I mean, look again. Embedded inside of this story, you're going to see the shepherds event. You're going to see the shepherds leaving, but in the middle, something spectacular happens. Let's check it out. Look again. This is the story. I zoomed out a little bit. They hurried off. They found Mary. So the shepherds are there and all that craziness of the schedule. And then the shepherds leave. And in the middle of all of that verse I just read, in the middle of all this chaos and craziness, these interruptions and surprises, in the middle of this chock-full schedule that they did not choose, this happens. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. In the middle of the craziness, Mary has this wonder-filled Christmas moment. In contrast to all the craziness around her, it says, but, because she's different, she's doing something different, Mary's heart fills with wonder and therefore worship. Now, the schedule, as you can tell, didn't suddenly open up. Instead, Mary's heart opened up to what God was doing. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. And then it says, the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things that they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. And so in the middle of the craziness, Mary has this wonder-filled Christmas moment, which is good news because we all face full calendars and less than ideal circumstances. And here's the bottom line. And so if you're writing anything down, jot this one down. Here's the great news for all of us. Even when the schedule won't let up, you can still open up to God. Even when the schedule won't let up, even though it's going crazy, this month is so full, you can still open up to God. And Mary's going to show us how. We're going to spend a few moments just unpacking this insight because what Mary did can help us recapture the wonder this Christmas. So here's what happened. First, you notice that Mary is seeing. Mary is seeing. You know there's a difference between being physically present and mentally present, right? You know, you're talking to your spouse and then they look up at you because they didn't catch any of it. They're like, huh? Right? Because they were physically present, but not mentally present. We do this all the time when we're driving because we're so comfortable on the roads and we can just have these habits. And so we just drive right along and we're physically present, but we're not mentally there. Or even when you're hanging out with your kids or your nieces or nephews or friends and they're doing their thing and you're in the room, but you're checking your phone. And so you're physically present, but you're mentally absent. That's not what's going on here. Mary had every reason to let everything fly by in a blur, but instead she's seeing, really seeing. She is present in the moment. She's drinking it in. She's watching every feature on the face of this newborn. She's drinking it in. She's taking in every detail of the shepherd's story. She's drinking it in. She's really seeing. She's there both physically and mentally. But Mary is also thinking. She's thinking. The word here for ponder means to put the pieces together. So Mary is a thinker, and any description of Mary that just says she has this blind faith is not accurate. Mary is a thinker. Back when the angel Gabriel appeared to Mary when this all started in Luke 1:29, it tells us that Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. And the word wonder there is not the one we're talking about with awe. This is a different kind of wonder. This is not casual questioning like, I wonder if it's gonna snow. All right, this is different. The word wonder here means to audit. It's an accounting term, and it means to make sure things add up. And so she's thinking from the get-go. And when Gabriel tells her that she'll give birth to the Messiah, she doesn't just say, oh, goody, that's neat. No, she replies with a question. Luke 1:34 says, how will this be, Mary asked the angel, since I am a virgin? She looks at the facts and she adds the new information and she tries to put the pieces together. She's really thinking and she's really seeing, and it creates wonder inside of her. And when I say wonder, when I'm talking about wonder, I'm not suggesting that your whole goal for the end of the month is just to have this feeling. Your whole goal is just to let nostalgia roll over you. That's actually not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about here is so much deeper, so much more profound, and so much more powerful. And this is what Mary is doing. She's puzzling out the story that God is telling her in her life because she's thinking about it. And as she learns more, the more she understands, the more she sees the story unfold, the more she connects the dots, the more in awe of God she is. She's looking and she's thinking. And then Mary is treasuring. There's a difference between how I eat pizza and how I eat steak. I am addicted to pizza. Confession. And in fact, on the way home, even though 7 minutes from the pizza place to my house, there might be 2 or 3 slices missing by the time I get home. And the way that I eat pizza is that I grab it, I put it in my mouth, I eat it, and then I do it again. How I eat pizza is not how I eat steak. How I eat pizza is how I devour it. How I eat steak is I savor it. There's a difference between how I eat pizza and how I eat steak. And what we're talking about here with Mary is the savoring thing. When I eat steak, every bite is a delight. I savor every bit of it. I cherish my steaks. And maybe I love steak too much, but you get the picture. Mary is treasuring. She's savoring. She's taking it all in. She wants to take this mental Instagram picture so that she can save it, so she can revisit it, so she can go back to that moment again and again. That's treasuring. And so she watches the shepherd's excitement. She hears their story of the angel's announcement. She realizes that this baby is the one who will grow up to save men like the ones that are crowding into the room right now, men far from God, people that desperately need him. And it becomes more real every second that goes by. And so she relishes what God reveals to her. And that wonder leads to worship. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. Mary is seeing and she's thinking and she's treasuring. And what Mary sees and ponders and treasures, the wonder of Christmas, that's for us too, to see and to think about and to treasure too. And when we do, our wonder will lead us to worship as well. Of course, I'm talking about Jesus, who was born of a virgin, of God coming as a baby. One article I read reported this, and you know this: the universe is incredibly huge. But just for scope, it would take a modern jet fighter more than 1 million years to reach the nearest star to the sun. Traveling at the speed of light, it would take us 100,000 years to cross just our Milky Way. And so that's just our galaxy, one of many millions and billions. And that's billions of miles. Numbers too big for us to comprehend. Galaxies too big for us to fit inside of our heads. In fact, most of the diagrams or things that try to help you understand the scale of the universe, they all fall flat. And the best thing I think you can do is when you walk out at night and it's clear and you look up at the sky and you get this deep understanding that it's big. And the God who created that big universe is bigger. And as big as our brains can stretch to the size of what we can see, our God is so much bigger. And here's Mary and Joseph. Mary's in labor. She's breathing hard. She's pushing, trying to make this baby come out. Sweat is pouring down her face. Joseph's praying, trying to be encouraging. She smacks his hand away. You're not doing it right. Just let me push. She's pushing. All right, and the baby comes out, and the baby is born. Just like any other baby. Small, helpless, fragile. God, bigger than the universe. God is a baby. That's a mystery. That's like the ocean. The ocean, just picture it. Every wave, miles deep in places, covering about 70% of the earth's surface. Every single drop of the ocean. And what God did that night? It was like trying to fit the ocean into a Coke bottle. God, baby, and he's here. And who is this God? Well, he's holy. He's glorious. He's perfect. It's like the sun. If you get too close, you get consumed. All that raw power, all that focused perfection bent towards this one goal of shining light, all that stunning light radiating out from it. This is like God, whose glory is so pure and intense that the Bible tells us that if we were to see him in our sinfulness, if we were to look on his face with our own eyes, we would surely die. But what is happening at Christmas? Mary's kissing that face. It's a mystery. He's here. Why? Is he here to flex his power and authority and to rule over us? I mean, he could do that and it'd be his right as God. But no, he's not here to rule over us. Mark 10:45 says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many." Is he here to demand the worship that is his due? No, he's not here to force us to our knees. Romans 2:4 tells us, "Don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? Does this mean nothing to you? Can't you see that his kindness is intended to turn you from your sin?" Well, is he here to condemn us for our sinful ways? Well, even though he'd be just to do so, no, not to judge, not to punish. John 3:17 tells us this, "For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him." So why is he here? Why the miracle of the manger? Why God so big, coming so small? God so powerful, coming so weak? Why God who owns and rules everything, submitting himself to the rule of a Roman emperor and being forced to be born in a certain place? Why is that happening? Why is God here? He's here for you. He's here for you. He was born to die for you. He came to go to a cross for you. That's why Isaiah says this, Isaiah 53:5. It says, "But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. And the punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed." Wow. I've had some really good friends in my life, but someone who would do that, that's amazing. That's divine. That's what Jesus came to do. And so if you want to recapture the wonder, it's possible. Even when the schedule won't let up, you can open up to God. And here's what it takes. It takes seeing and thinking and treasuring Jesus. You can't change most of your schedule. It's set for the month pretty much. And you can find yourself in less than ideal circumstances. But even when the schedule won't let up, you can open up to God. And there's a lot of ways that you can move from wonder stuck to wonder struck. But here's a couple of things that I want to suggest for you. And the first is this, just to think about the gift. Think about the gift. John 3:16 tells us that God gave Jesus, like that he is the gift. So spend some time seeing and savoring the greatest gift, Jesus. And maybe it's through reading the Bible. I mean, you can still jump in and join us in your campus team in a Bible reading plan. Just go to parkerhill.org/Bible and spend this last week leading up to Christmas reading the Bible, helping you think about the gift. Or maybe it's just coming back for one of our Christmas celebrations, bringing a friend with you and celebrating with us as you see and savor Christ this Christmas. The second thing I would encourage you to do is just to think about the giver. James 1:17 says this to us, that every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. Like you can rely on him to give good and perfect gifts. And so you're going to get a lot of gifts. Food or time, attention, presents. You're going to get a lot of gifts this year. And one of the ways that you can really make this a meaningful Christmas is to receive the gift with joy, knowing where it ultimately comes from. So yes, focus on the gift, but also focus on the giver, Remember who gave you all those good things to enjoy. And so, when you have that taste of that delicious Christmas cookie, thank the one who gave you taste buds. And when you sit there by the tree in your cozy house, thank the one who gave you the place to stay. And let every hug and every laugh and every present and every person, let every gift turn your attention to the giver. And if you do these things, your heart will fill with wonder and your life will fill with worship. As we wrap up this service today, you're going to see that we're giving you some space to savor the miracle of Christmas. And this is time for you. We're going to watch a video and we're going to sing a song. And I want you to use this time to reflect with awe on what kind of God we're talking about here. The kind of God who would draw nobodies like Joseph and Mary together and shepherds to himself and wise men eventually to this miracle in Mary's arms. And I want us to wonder with Mary right alongside her about that first Noel, that first Christmas where the spirit of Christmas, the wonder of it all, created this awe in Mary's heart and can do the same for us today. My hope is that this season will indeed be the most wonderful time of the year and that your wonder would lead you to worship.